We're so excited to be here with you, whether you're in Zoom with us or you're on Facebook Live or you're watching in a day or a week on YouTube. But I'm Isaac Wells, the Director of Professional Learning with the Core Collaborative, and so excited to be here with two of my favorite people, Dr. Paul Bloomberg and Mrs. Rachel Carillo Fairchild. So I'm going to hand it over to Paul to get us started.
Hi, everyone. I am Paul Bloomberg. I am the CEO and founder, one of the founders of the Core Collaborative Learning Network. Our mission is to expand student ownership and agency, and while doing so, treat teachers and principals really well. I don't know if that's officially part of the mission, but that's what we believe, right? I wanted to introduce a really good friend of mine, Rachel, but I want to introduce her by asking this question, and then you can introduce yourself. So the question is for all of us. What is one thing that you're grateful for now? I guess it's not post-pandemic because we're in the middle of it, right? It seems like there's no end in sight. But what's one thing you're grateful for now that you didn't have prior to the pandemic? And that might be a great way to introduce yourself. I know it's hard.
Wow. So I'm thinking, I've always been grateful for time with my family, but I have to say, just being home and not being in between trips, being home used to consist of, unpacking my bags, sleeping in my bed for a night or two and then hitting the road again. So really being able to settle in and really fully be present with my family has been a real gift for me. So I really enjoyed that. I have a garden.
I bet you never thought being a road warrior that you'd ever have a garden.
Exactly.
Yeah. Isaac, what about you?
Yeah, so, the last few days I've gotten to work with some great teams, and though kind of like Rachel, I've enjoyed being home. I've loved the fact that even with everything happening, we get to work with these amazing partners that we built these relationships with and get to see the amazing things they're doing day in, day out to really make virtual teaching and learning work.
Cool.
That's got me pumped.
So you're grateful for working?
Yeah.
Which, as a consultant right now, we are very grateful for working.
Memoir is basically that, grateful for working in the school.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so I guess now it's my turn. I think what I'm most grateful for, outside of having my health, is basically seeing I think both of our sons kind of thrive in different ways. One who was really struggling with addiction, doing like extremely well right now, and now he's giving back to that community. And so it's really cool to see him thrive. And the other one got fired, of course, or lost his job during the pandemic. But what I'm really grateful for is that we had the ability to hire him. So that's kind of cool. But I think what I'm even more grateful for than that is that he is like finding creativity and finding ways to be creative, because that's really what drives him. And so to see him, we got him a keyboard and all this stuff, and to see him get excited about that, he was working in a restaurant, not feeling very good about that. And so I think he's really proud to work with us for the first time he said in his whole life. He is proud to tell people what he does. So that I'm grateful for that. Yeah. So I think even though this horrible thing has not given us many gifts, I think it's kind of cool to try to look inside as to what the gifts that we got. What about other people out there that are watching? What are you grateful for?
Yeah.
I'm kind of interested. What about you, Rachel? Now, of course, it's complete silence.
Yeah. And I was going to say, anybody who wants to talk, let me know in the chat and I can unmute you.
Ooh, that would be cool to get someone unmuted.
Improving things as we go. So
the next thing that I want to ask before we get off to a running start here is, I know, Rachel, you have dedicated pretty much your whole life to working with multi-language learners. Like why are you so passionate about this topic? Like, what does it mean to you personally?
So I was raised in a town right outside of downtown LA, high poverty, high EL population, and was an English learner myself. So the experience for me is personal. The work for me is personal. So when I walk in to classrooms and when I partner with teachers and I stand in front of those classrooms, I see myself as a student. And I want for them to be able to see that they can be successful and they can achieve at high levels. And for so many of them, they just get these messages, these constant messages, not proficient, not proficient yet. And, I can see why so many of them eventually give up hope. And I want them to have that hope. And so it's really personal for me.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because sometimes English language learners are talked about in a negative way. And I guess what always would overwhelm me is like, what is possibly negative about learning a second or third or sometimes even fourth language? So I never really get why some folks might say, oh, well, the ELLs.
Right.
And I'm like, and my heart just sinks because I'm like, well, I wish I could be fluent in multiple languages. Yeah. So like when you were young, like what is something that you remember that like in being an English language learner, that something that it might be painful or good, I don't know, that doesn't matter to me, but what is something that changed you?
I have to say, it literally was my teachers. It was my teachers. And I was an English learner in the early 70s before we had, a lot of the things that we have now. So, dealing with English learners back then consisted of putting us in the back of the room at a listening post with, headphones while everyone else was doing, circle time and, all this fun stuff. And so I remember feeling really isolated, and that always really stuck with me. But I had a teacher in first grade that, so kindergarten wasn't so positive. First grade just opened me up to learning. And it was, I don't know what, it just felt like all of a sudden she included me. I felt included in the learning. I didn't feel like I was outside in the corner watching in, and that just it made me love learning and made me excited about it. And so I always think about that. I thought about that as a teacher myself. How do I ignite that in my own students? How do I make sure that they feel like they're part of this classroom and they're not just on the periphery looking in?
Yeah, because I think even to this day, I would imagine that a lot of our students feel that way, right? They still, even though we've come a long way in supporting like our kids, I imagine that there are teachers out there that don't feel equipped. What do I do? And then I think that there are a lot of kids that probably feel that way. So I imagine that really motivates you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it does. It does. But it also, that reminder that, we have a ways to go. We have a lot of learning to do in terms of, and a lot of just validating the English learners and their experiences. And like you were saying, instead of looking at it as, a deficit, how can I look at those students in terms of what they bring to my classroom and what they add to my classroom. So I think that's a powerful way to approach teaching English language learners.
So one more question and then I'm going to shut up. Well, kind of, because I probably won't. But like, I know you've written a lot of books. You have a few in your name and a chapter or two, right? But out of all the books that you have written, what's the one that you're most proud of?
Wow.
And why?
So, right. So I think my how to reach and teach English language learners, Isaac just had that one up right
I want to
now.
throw it up for a minute because I thought you might say
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And I think the reason that one really was special for me is because it really started with the idea that we can't teach them until we've reached them. We really have to connect with our English learners. We have to know their stories. We have to know who they are, where they are in their language acquisition level. They're not a monolith as a population. And so we need to be, we need to first reach out and make sure that we're connecting with those students and that we know that population before we can get to the point where we can teach them. So, and then my chapter in peer power, I think the importance of student ownership of learning in terms of language acquisition, I think it's long overdue. It's time that we empower our English learners to take control and to really own their language acquisition and to know where they are in their language acquisition, to be able to set goals for themselves and watch themselves get better. Yep.
Yeah, I think you're right, because I think we do a lot of that for them.
Yes.
And there's no reason why we can't be completely transparent and let them show them where they're at on a progression of language and have them identify what their next learning step is and why they want to get there. And I really believe in that too. What are there any projects that you're working on now that you're excited about?
So I'm really excited about our Clarity for Virtual Teaching and Learning. I'm engaged in writing some lessons for our English learners. You know, when it comes to Clarity, we know that it has you know, a high effect size in terms of the visible learning research. And, you know, that translates across the board. So our clarity, us being clear about what our English learners need to learn, where they are in their language acquisition, and then passing that on to, you know, making sure that our students are clear and know what they need to be successful. So working on that curriculum is really exciting for me. It's exciting for me to see it come to life.
Yeah, I'm super excited about it too. We have 2 teachers here in New York that have been doing a core of the work, and I just shot Rachel. I kind of knew the answer to the question. I didn't know how she was going to answer though, because it could have been anything. But I shot Rachel the first unit that was completed from Danielle, a 3rd grade teacher. And now Rachel is creating designated and integrated units from that. So we're all really excited about it, because we realize how stressful this is on teachers, and we really believe we have a way to take the edge off.
Yes.
By doing a lot of the work up front, which I think they need right now, because I know as a consultant, the planning time feels like it's quadruple what it was before when it was live. And so I can't even imagine what they're all going through. I mean, I do know because I talk to them a lot, but they're planning a lot.
They are.
So I'm excited about that. I'm going to turn this over to Isaac, but I wanted to just hear your story a little bit.
I love it. Keep bouncing in.
I never knew the name of Reach and Teach until just now.
Yeah. And what's funny is I was, when you see me looking around, I was trying to find the formative assessment book to pop up, but I wasn't fast enough because I thought—
You don't need to visual everything. We can just talk.
No, I like to do it because I know.
But I appreciate the effort.
Yeah. But
yeah, you have a book on assessing formative assessment for ELLs. You have the Reach and Teach book. You have, what else? The chapter in Peer Power.
Peer Power, and then I have a chapter on Common Core with English learners and how.
Oh yeah, with the Common Core of the Yellow Book.
Yes.
Yeah. I remember that. Cool.
Yeah.
No, Isaac, it's your shot. Your turn.
And I've got them all in my closet. So that's a perfect segue to this question, because Rachel and I planned an amazing session for you in December. And the world changed a little bit. And so we got on the phone the other day and said, hey, what do you really want to talk about? And one of the questions I had is like, what structures are you seeing that are working, that are really supporting teachers and principals in every one of these times? And you said this question keeps coming up, this idea of like, why analyze student work? Why do you keep bringing that up? So I know you wanted a moment to talk about that, so I'll share your your little visual support.
Yes, so we know that analyzing student work is a powerful practice. We know that, you know, it helps us understand our impact. It helps us, you know, have that curricular alignment, have vertical coherence. All of those things matter. But when it comes down to it, that effect size of kids learn more, right? That's the driver behind why analyze student work. And when it comes to our English learners, I just don't feel, and I hear this from teachers all the time, we don't have enough information. We don't have enough assessments, and you know, to really be able to measure their progress or to keep track of their progress or to even help them identify their next steps in learning. So I think when it comes to our English learners, it's especially critical that we have assessments in our hands, and that we know how to and have protocols to help us analyze that student work effectively.
So I'm kind of thinking to what you and Paul were just talking about, because we know, you know, being fluent in more than one language is one of the most marketable skills you can have. So if you get out into the workforce and you have that, you know, you just got bumped up a notch for any hiring. But like Paul said, often this has been seen as a deficit, you know, something working against us. But now that we're in some face-to-face, some blended, some virtual learning, like what do we do to make sure that we hit the language, you know, the language learning they need along with those general content skills that everybody else is working on?
Right. So absolutely. It's kind of like what Paul and I were just talking about, where, you know, I'm working on developing that designated, those designated ELD lessons and that specific time where we have an opportunity, and even in a virtual setting, to focus on language acquisition. But besides that, all of our lessons, and I think we have that slide on the swirl, you know, and the importance of using those domains of language every day, every content area, right? Ensuring that even in a virtual setting, are you engaging your English learners in speaking, in writing, in reading and listening, so that we're equipping them with the language and giving them the opportunity to practice the language. I also think just thinking about our English learners and how they feel, because I think, Paul, you've hit on something really important. The idea that, you know, there are a lot of English language learners out there that feel ashamed of speaking another language, right? And they're embarrassed. And I think that's because a lot of times I don't think we make them feel like you know, they have an opportunity to shine when it comes to, I speak another language. That's something I should be proud of. It's
totally.
It's not a negative. But I go into a lot of classrooms where, you know, the kids, you can see that they don't even want to be identified as an English learner. They don't want, you know, they're ashamed of it. Unfortunately,
here in New York, they call them multi-language learners, and I really like that name. I think it honors, I think it's definitely more strengths-based instead of like deficit-minded.
Right.
But yeah, I think about that all the time, and being a principal, and, you know, most of our students were ELLs, and just seeing them being ashamed to even talk even a little bit.
Right.
I kind of think that there's a lot of cool things right now in distance learning that support this work. Don't you think? I mean, I think it's a cool, exciting time for the possibilities of what we could do, where kids can have fun practicing language and doing it in an authentic way, don't you think?
It is, absolutely. And I love that. You know, I was just working with a teacher on developing, you know, lessons where like the kids can actually take you on a tour of their backyard and walk you through, you know, where they are, or they can do a cooking lesson, right? And cook something in their kitchens with a sibling, or but it's that owning your learning can take place anywhere, anytime.
Yeah.
Right.
I never even thought about that, because like we got a request, I don't know, a couple days ago from a school here in the Bronx, and they wanted us to do 20 days on supporting and developing an inclusive curriculum, which I think is super honorable. But then I started to think how important PBL is.
Right.
On this work. And I was like really thinking about like being a principal and us we did 3 immersive PBL units a year at my school when I was principal, and our ELLs would shine and our special needs kids would shine, and all of a sudden they'd be leaders. And so I love that you brought in the authentic things that kids could do, because I think a lot of the language, the designated things that I would observe as a principal and now as a consultant,
right,
were just kind of nonsense.
Right.
Like it was repetitious language practice that didn't have any meaning, or like that the kids weren't really didn't even care. But like I can imagine if I had to do a cooking lesson.
Yeah.
I know.
Whoa! I could share my culture. I could talk about things that I know really well. Like, I think that there would be a sense of pride there. I could do as many takes as I want with my mom's phone.
Right.
Like, I guess I never even thought of that. So I think now I'm going to push us to even think more about things like that.
Right.
For these menus, because I think to me, there's possibilities here that now my husband.
I was going to say Princess Tony's chiming in. He loves the cooking lesson idea.
Yeah. Oh, maybe we'll do one.
Yeah, I was going to say, you guys can do a live video.
Oh my God.
That's a really, I love thinking about it that way, because I think where we're getting it wrong with distance learning is to pretend it's a regular school day.
Right.
All of the research is saying do not do a regular school day. And yet we see system after system after system doing regular school days. And the kids could be often doing investigations, and they could be doing explorations, and they could get off the computer screen.
Right.
They could be doing that. That will take them a week to get it right. And they'd actually be having fun and practicing language in a really, I think I'm hoping that our organization is really pushing people to think differently about remote teaching and learning, because I think it's not like the normal classroom.
No.
Right. It's not. And, it's kind of, that's why I mentioned designated ELD, because I always felt like that designated ELD block just felt so disconnected.
Totally.
And, oh my gosh. And now we have the capacity to really be able to connect it to what they're doing every day at home. We're in their home with them now, right? We literally are at home with them. So
I think the connections that come from that, like, and the pride that would come from lessons where they're actually sharing about their life in meaningful ways, and having all the artifacts that they need around them. I really feel like we can make some really good changes, even though like this is horrible for everyone. I just really believe it's pushing us to think differently about what's really important.
Absolutely.
Well, and my wife, Dana, who many of you know is not on right now, but she's in the next room over singing bedtime songs.
Yeah.
But, one of the things she's been pushing for in her school is to say, when your Google Meet time is up and it's time to take a break or whatever, she always leaves it on, but gives the kids like some time to talk. And my co-teacher for years in Henderson County used to joke, like, how are you guys able to get all these, like, to get the speaking and listening scores up so quickly? And we would joke, we eat lunch with them every day, but that was fun. We ate lunch with them. We talked to them on the playground, and, we learned more Spanish. They learned more English. We learned more, whatever it was. But there's something to be said for that, because like you said, that disconnect between the purpose and the practice, there's no disconnect in playground language and lunch talk and like figuring out how to cook or build or whatever.
Right.
Yeah, no, I love that you said that. So I'm going to butt out now and let you keep going because I know you have things planned.
No, this was the plan, was we've got enough planned for 4 hours. So let's get a few of the pieces.
We didn't want to be more talking heads with the PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Although there is a PowerPoint that someone said they wanted, you can have the PowerPoint.
Yeah. Well, I'll send it out.
For sure you can have it, but the last thing we didn't want for folks is to come on at night and watch a PowerPoint and a talking head. So what I'm interested in knowing is, knowing that you have different language acquisition levels, how would you plan for that with these more real world experiences? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but I know you can handle it. Like how do you ensure that you're meeting the demands, or like what they need, because they need to be taught at their zone of proximal development a little higher than where they're at.
Right.
So how do you ensure that with these more authentic lessons that I do believe will answer a lot of problems that we're having, right? With not moving our learners. Yeah. So how would you do that in a more like a PBL or authentic, we called them at Lead and Learn with Doug Reeves, what we call it, authentic learning experience.
Authentic learning experiences.
Or it was authentic performance tests. Like
performance tasks. It. I think for the very first thing is, I think, we're kind of at a deficit this year because a lot of that testing that we needed to take place with our English learners didn't take place at the end of the school year last year. So teachers don't even have that information. So the first thing you have to do is really make sure that you have a sense for where your English learners are in those 4 domains of language. And then when you're planning those tasks, like that cooking lesson, how can I have if I have, my newcomers, or if I've got, level 3s or level 2s, right, kind of in the middle, and they're in that, that middle zone of language development, how do I support them in being able to demonstrate their language abilities to me, right? That's what it's all about, is how can I give you all the supports that you need so that you can use the language effectively, right? You can feel successful using the language. So whether those are frames, or whether it's having you, use some of the amazing apps that are out there to demonstrate and to show me, or using my mom's phone, right, to record myself.
Right.
Things like that. But I think just really making sure that you're hitting those domains of language, and that you're hitting them at the level that your kids need. And it can't be the same thing for everybody across the board.
Yeah. I'm still shocked to this day when I work with teachers and we ask them, like, okay, so talk to me about your multi-language learners, and they're all categorizing them at the same thing.
Yes.
And then even to this day, we're like, so where is their reading, writing, listening, and speaking? Yes. And there's no knowledge of it.
Right.
It's sitting in a binder someplace.
Right.
But so what I heard you saying is, even though we're not doing maybe the state assessment,
right,
I know the work that you did at PS13, you developed an assessment for PS13, like you created one for the school.
Right.
So I think that is probably really needed right now, right?
It is. Some way of being able to identify where our kids are. And you can use WIDA can-do descriptors if you're a WIDA state. You can use, whatever your state language development standards are to help you come up with some kind of an observational protocol to just see, where are my kids in speaking, where are they in listening, and reading and writing, so that then we can sit down and really have some meaningful planning time that's really, going to move our language learners forward in language acquisition. Because if we don't start with that, then we're doing them a disservice.
We'll start with the evidence.
Yes, exactly.
Start with the evidence, right? And actually, in so many states, actually doing a more formative assessment is actually probably way better, because a lot of the times at the state level, in a lot of the states, the teachers get the data, it's already 5 months old.
Yeah.
Right. And so it wasn't really that great of data in many places anyway.
Right.
Now in California, you know, we scored all of our things on site, so we had really good data immediately at my school anyway.
Right.
But I know a lot of people send theirs out and then they wait. So like in some ways, it seems like the formative language assessment that you're talking about, building one, designing one, would actually probably give you better evidence.
It would give you absolutely better evidence, because I believe, you know, to my core, that nobody knows your English language learners better than you do. You spend every day with them. You watch what they're able to do. And so, you know, equipped with a formative language assessment, you can use those observations and those opportunities where you're listening to their use of language to be able to establish a baseline for yourself. And Paul, that, you know, the thing about a lot of those state language assessments, those summatives, is that, you know, teachers end up using that composite score.
Yeah,
and
I know.
It's so misleading. So if I'm told that this student is a 3, I'm treating them like a 3, but actually in reading and writing they're a 1. And so, you know, I need to be aware of that so that my expectations are appropriate, and so that I'm designing appropriate instruction for that student to move.
So you're saying that not all English language learners need the same exact thing?
Nope.
They don't all just need language stems and language frames?
Nope.
No, I know. It's, I know, I'm being silly, but yeah, I feel like, I feel in some ways, California was really moving in the right direction with the designated and integrated. Whether we pulled it off or not, I think is different from district to district to district. But I really value the idea of designated language instruction, because me being taking 4 years of German, I can't imagine being thrown in a class and learning German by just sitting there.
Right.
Designated German. When I lived in Vienna, I got designated German instruction at my level.
Exactly.
Almost 2 hours a day, and then I got integrated the rest of
the day.
But if I wouldn't have had the designated instruction, I couldn't have even like made it through the day.
Right.
You know, my confidence level. And so like when I hear people not wanting to do designated instruction, are you saying you want to get rid of Spanish 1, Spanish 2, Spanish 3, and Spanish 4? You want them just to jump to Spanish 4?
Right.
It's silly. It's silly that we don't honor the designated, and everyone puts all the value on the integrated. And very little value on designated.
Right. And I think it's truly because of that disconnect, because designated has never been connected to the rest of the learning, right?
Yeah.
So, and that's what we can do now. That's what's so exciting about our Clarity for Virtual Teaching and Learning units, is that we're actually taking that designated ELD and we're connecting it to the rest of the learning so that kids can see how it all fits together. Now I'm learning the function and the structure of the English language while I'm working on content that's meaningful to me, because I see how
it's connected. Yeah, because I think a lot of the programs lead us astray. I think a lot of the programs work pretty well for newcomers.
Right.
They have pretty good scope and sequences, just survival language, but then they kind of really fall short to me because it isn't connected to the rest of the day, and they really need that.
And how many times can kids learn about body parts?
Yeah.
And
I know,
and bananas,
especially if you buy curriculum. And then they don't test out of that particular level, then they do it again. So what a way to bore somebody.
Right. And it's no wonder we have kids that end up as long-term English learners. I've walked into classrooms where the teacher will tell me, this is a newcomers class, and I've got the kids walking up to me saying, "Hi, how are you? I love your outfit." And I'm like, wait, this isn't a newcomer. Oh, and they'll tell me this is his 3rd year in that class. And it's like, we've got to be able to do better than that.
Because they use a standardized test to
Yes.
make the designation, and the standardized tests are biased.
Right.
And so, you know,
Right.
there's really no way around it. So
Right.
what I hear coming from you is the formative language evidence, by
That we
creating a
gather.
formative assessment for language connected to your state language standards is really the best way to go to get information
Right.
about, to get right there information about your kids.
About your kids, and to be able to plan instruction that meets their needs and moves them further on that progression of language acquisition. Without that, we're just shooting in the dark. And, you know, we have no target, right? Because we don't know really where they are. And if I've got a kid who's been sitting in newcomer ELD, designated ELD for 3 years in a row, you know, we're doing that child a huge disservice by not using our own formative assessments, find out where they are, and let's move them. Yep, so that they don't get stuck.
So do we have any questions from people watching?
Yeah, we need them, and my goal is that I want 2 of these people to ask that they can talk.
Oh, well, you know,
now that
I
works.
believe there's people we know on here.
Yeah,
Anybody want to ask a question? Please be brave, because we're just talking to ourselves, which we do enjoy, because we don't, well, Isaac, we see a lot of each other.
Yeah, but it's always 6 hours of work.
But we miss Rachel.
I miss you guys.
Something I'm really hearing parallel to the formative assessment piece, though, while I'm hoping that somebody, Gina or somebody's going to say, hey, I want to talk, is that idea back to included and belonging, and to just the idea of us having the perception and the understanding of what it's like. Because like you said, how many of us have gone through 2, 3, 4 years of foreign language, found it very difficult while we had a dedicated class, and then think, well, you don't really need that. Like, you just pick it up.
You don't need designated language instruction. Just go for integrated. Like,
and
I
it's
can't
so
even
easy
imagine.
to feel that. Yeah.
I just remember when I went to school in Vienna, I was a music student, and I was taking lessons at the Vienna Conservatory, and they were all, my lectures were in German. I was completely disengaged. You know, until about the end of the year, where things started to connect to me. But before that, I just would sit there and do other things. And so you think about how many kids are sitting there feeling, and you even mentioned it, Rachel, that you felt isolated, that you felt like you weren't a part of the group, that you felt like you didn't belong.
Yes.
And so anyway, what are some things you guys were going to share to the full group that we're missing?
And I just threw in the chat, the first couple people who want to share something out, I'm going to send them a couple of books.
Oh, there you go.
So whoever wants to ask to be unmuted, or whoever just raises their hand, they're going to get that. Hey, do you want to talk about some of the, like, you know, talking about the Freyer model and the concept development that you mentioned earlier?
Absolutely. Yeah. Do you have,
let me pull that up.
So, you know, I mean, Freyer model, you know, when we talk about English learners, we know one of the most powerful things we can do is build academic vocabulary. But how do we build it from a conceptual perspective, right? Making sure that they're understanding the concept of the word. So it's not just about, you know, and it's, you know, I did the same thing. I would give my kids these long lists of vocabulary words, and sure, they might have memorized, you know, a few of them for a couple of days, but they never really owned that vocabulary, right? I didn't give them that opportunity to really own the vocabulary and conceptualize what it meant. So that's what the interactive Freyer model does. You know, if you just Google interactive Freyer models, there's all kinds of really great ones. This is one that there's Google slides for it. And again, you know, the definition goes in the middle, or the word goes in the middle. You've got your definition, the characteristics of that word. Now, the other thing about this is we need to be thoughtful and very intentional about the words that we choose, right? Making sure that the vocabulary that we're choosing is the right vocabulary, right? So not all vocabulary lists are created equally. And so really making sure that if I'm going to take the time and have my students dedicate the time to really conceptualizing this vocabulary, I want to make sure that it's truly the vocabulary they need.
Yeah.
So,
I'm with you, because I was thinking like all the work that we've been doing regarding unpacking concepts, because the standards are really surface. And so they just say the word like character. And like, if you just map that out, there's major characters, minor characters, flat characters, round characters, static characters, dynamic characters. And the kids starting in about 4th grade need all those terms to talk about what's happening in novels. And if you don't have those concepts, then you can't really do really good literary analysis, because those concepts help us to analyze literature. And if you're just using character, right, and these kids can learn, I mean, we can have kindergartners learn a lot of those concepts. So I really love that you are sharing the work regarding like concept development. I think we've even changed it at the Core Collaborative from vocabulary development to concept development.
The concept development. Yeah, absolutely. Because that is what it needs to be. It has to go deeper than just, memorization of words and terminology. Our kids need to understand, like you were saying, with character, they need to understand how understanding what a character is and all those elements, whether they're a static character, right? That is going to help me understand and make sense
and
of what I'm reading. Exactly.
Yeah. Explain what I'm noticing in the text, because I have the right concepts to describe it. Now, Gina is raising her hand.
Oh, good. I didn't see it. Here we go. It was blocked.
Are you kidding?
No. I got her now. It was blocked by you guys' beautiful faces. I couldn't see it.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you should see me without my glasses. I'm not so beautiful.
You remember me from Staten Island, Tonville High School.
I recognize you. How's it going?
All right, it's going good. I just became interim acting principal at Tonville High School.
Oh, very cool! Congratulations.
Thank you. So I know there's a lot of work that we have to do, and I know like monitoring the progressions with students and our L's and we do multi-language learners, right? We do call them the MLLs, right? So I think I know as a former high school science teacher, teaching the body parts, and high school is all about content and trying to tell them, memorize those parts. It's difficult, but it's also difficult for some of these teachers to try and break away from those prior learning patterns that they've always had. Yeah. How can you make it more inclusive? And we've worked really hard with performance tests with our teachers and making them dive deeper. But now I'm thinking more like, and I know we just pushed back our in-person learning and we're going remote. So how could we make it more authentic for our students? Because if we follow a pattern of, this is what you're going to do every day, 20 minutes, log in, right? That's it. We're high school. These kids are waking up at 2 in. They're not getting on.
Yeah. Or they've been up till 2 in, like my sons.
Right.
5 a.m., right?
Yeah. So I'm trying to think of ways to make it more, like how can I get these teachers to think more deeply about all of our students? Because we need to know where did they leave off in March? Their learning stopped on March 13th. And how are we going to engage our students who may struggle with the language barriers and trying just to figure out how to get on a Google Classroom? Because technology, having that parent there, and if they're not technologically savvy, they're not there to help them. And I worry, and I know even I have a 9-year-old and I have a 12-year-old. My 12-year-old will find loopholes, but he knows what he has to do. My 9-year-old, I had anchor charts in my house. I made it look like her classroom. But I know I'm not going to be there to help her. And I know sometimes she struggles herself with reading. And I know if she's struggling and she speaks the language, what are we going to do to support our students who may not feel included? And what strategies? How can I support my teachers now?
Go for it, Rachel.
Right. So I think the very first, thank you, Gina, first of all, for asking a question and for,
I take the risk.
Yeah, no kidding.
I miss my Staten Island teachers. My Staten Island so I really believe, first and foremost, so it's that reach and teach again. I really honestly believe that the very first thing we need to do is we need to slow down. I know that we're all in a rush to get this content, and we're worried that the kids have missed out. We're worried about all this stuff, but keep in mind that these kids all have a story, right? There's a story behind them, and let's connect with them first. Let's slow down enough to make sure that they feel included, make sure that they feel seen, right? And that they feel visible.
Right.
And so that's the very first thing is, you know, encourage your teachers. It's okay to take the time. It's okay to slow down a little bit and use that opportunity to get to know the families, you know, because the kids will share and talk about, you know, especially at the high school level, they'll talk about what's happening at home and challenges that they're having. And I think, you know, a lot of times we just forget that we need to slow down enough to connect with them and to make sure that that's happening. And then after that, it's what do we know about where our English learners are? What information do we have about them, about their language acquisition levels? I know when I did work with PS13, you know, the teachers, again, it was that challenge of getting that information in the hands of every teacher, not just an overall score, but we need to know where they are in each of the domains of language. And then making sure that we're developing learning opportunities for them. Again, real authentic opportunities for them to demonstrate the use of language. And so I've had kids, I've worked with teachers on planning lessons where kids are taking their teachers on a tour, like I was saying, of their bedrooms, of, you know, their kitchen, you know, just walking around and talking about, you know, cooking a lesson.
Even showing a photo.
Showing a photo. I've had them doing interviews of family members, interviewing, you know, sometimes a lot of these are intergenerational homes where they've got grandparents living at the house. And so interview one of your grandparents, video it, even if it's in your primary language, right? How powerful for a student to feel you know, that pride in sharing a personal story about their family, right? And so giving them opportunities to do things like that. And then, you know, just bringing in those authentic opportunities for your language learners to show and demonstrate their language skills. But you have to start from where they are. You have to.
So I was really impressed by Linda Darling-Hammond, who's one of my heroes. From Stanford, right? And she was saying that across the country, the places that were dealing with remote teaching and learning the best were not the places that were trying to mirror a school day.
Yeah.
They were places where kids were involved in more project-based or problem-based learning.
Yeah.
And they were set off to do these authentic tasks off camera. And then they were coming back and sharing the different things, and motivation was through the roof, engagement was through the roof. And so she was really mentioning that a lot. And I know she's a big, you know, she's always been following like other countries and what they do with PBL or PBL-like stuff. So I really think that that's another strategy that we're not using enough. You know, we're trying to just teach like we used to teach, right?
It is.
And Gina, you mentioned it. We go back, we revert back to those old ways because that's what way we were taught.
It's the way we know. It's what we know, and it's what's comfortable for us. It's what, yeah.
Trying to change that mentality has been it's a challenge in high school because they always tie everything to a test. Yeah. And you try to move away from that. And I know when I first started teaching, in the early 90s, it was about PBLs, and they kept saying it's coming. And here it is. Now's the time. I could go back and go find my former APs and tell them, we're here.
It's true. Finally, I think we might break through a little bit with that.
I think so.
But who else do we have? Because it's almost an hour's almost up.
Yeah.
Right on, Gina. Thank you. She gets a book.
Yeah. I get a book. All right.
I sent you a message, so you got to
Okay.
email me, and I'm going to get your address. And
All right.
we still got time for somebody else to jump on that.
Okay.
Rachel,
See,
I've got a
Gina?
great question.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate all your help.
Yeah,
I'm always
anytime,
on these.
anytime.
Thank you.
We love Staten Island.
Email me, Gina.
Okay.
I'd love to be in contact with you.
Oh,
Shoot me-
thank you so much, Rachel. I appreciate that.
I'll
Thank
put
you.
her email in here.
Okay.
So this question is coming from Facebook Live, and oops, I just lost it. It just scrolled. There it is. Of course. But what do we say to this argument? I need, for kids to be successful, I need to teach them all the vocabulary ahead of time.
So nothing wrong with that. So there's nothing wrong with front loading vocabulary. Again, I think, if we're going to prepare, but we have to do it in a way that makes sense. So here's the thing with front loading vocabulary. The reason that that's powerful, a powerful strategy, is because a lot of times our English learners are lacking prior knowledge, right? So they don't have, they've never they've never been to an ocean, or they've never learned about the forest, or they've never even heard the term before. And so in order for us, again, to build some conceptual understanding, so that when I do get to the teaching, to my true teaching of content, then I'm more prepared. But again, it can't just be a list of vocabulary words. It has to be a deeper conceptual understanding, so that my English learners can connect that new learning with something that they already have heard before. And that's what I think, that's the piece that's missing. And that's why sometimes we're in a big rush to hit our English learners with these big long lists of vocabulary words. But we have to keep in mind that, is that building any conceptual understanding for them? Is it lasting learning that they're going to be able to connect to new learning? And right? And if not, then I need to narrow the focus and be more intentional about the vocabulary that I am teaching. So I don't see anything wrong with pre-teaching vocabulary, or the idea of front loading. I know a lot of teachers do that, and it's a fine practice. But just be intentional about the vocabulary and use and stick.
Well, it has to be the words that unlock the content.
Yes,
right?
I love the way you put that.
Right, it has to be the words that they need to know to understand the concept.
Yes.
That's why I think when we call it vocabulary development, then it takes us down the road of all this bad practice.
Yeah.
Right.
Like memorizing words, like defining words, and all this stuff that doesn't grow.
Right.
Vocabulary, right? So I think
the
concept, Julie Stern's work, I really love.
Yes.
All her concept books that she has. I know she does a lot of work with international schools.
Right. Right.
Care concepts. You have two concepts. How do they connect? How they
connect?
So yeah, I think like it's what are the concepts that are needed?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
If you just keep in mind that learning happens where those connections take place, that's where learning happens in the brain. And so we have to be intentional about, like you said, what are the words that unlock the learning for our students? And that's where we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck.
It hit me like last year at the end, I think it was prior pandemic. I was with like a high schooler, and he was struggling with coming up with the theme. Well, they had practiced the skill to death. I just said, so what is theme? No clue. So what was really getting in the way had nothing to do with the skill. He had no idea of the concept at all. And he had been doing that for 5-6 years and never knew what the concept was, what it meant at all.
Right.
And I think sometimes we diagnose and we think it's a skill problem. I think now more not just for English language learners, but for all learners, I start having conversation. Well, what does this concept mean to you? And then you're like, oh, and like, okay, let's figure out how we can do some inquiry around this concept.
Around the concept.
Where are we at, Isaac?
Well, and I was going to say, I have such a deep understanding of so many of these concepts because I've been a teacher. But I did great in high school, college, all that. But it's so interesting how you can learn the skill just enough. And then all of a sudden you got to teach it to a 10-year-old and you're thinking, oh gosh, I'm about to ask you what theme means. I wonder if I could answer that question without a definition, but to really answer it.
Yeah.
Right.
Where are we at with time? Because I think we have to split.
Yeah, we're right at that time. And so I'm going to share just a couple of quick things as we wrap up. And I'm going to just let you guys know that I'm going to ask you right before we sign off to share one of the funniest things you've heard over the last 6 months. So be ready for that. I definitely have mine in mind. But we just want to say thank you all so much for being on and joining us, participating, and just for what you're doing every day. We're super pumped about this. We got the blether.
I had my first blether. I'm speaking probably not the right accent.
yeah, right. This is the North Carolina boy way to say it, but definitely be looking for that. We've got things out there about it. Next month, we've got Katie, another great friend. It'll be the same format, and she's really digging into engaging kids in the formative process. So it's going to be a great
social studies.
Yeah, related note to this, but focused on social studies. Yeah.
Yes.
So really, these last few are all kind of almost like we
connected.
Yeah, almost like we planned it.
Yeah.
Planned it.
Yeah. Of course, every Tuesday you can join us. Excuse me. 6:30 to 7 Eastern. We've got a great range of topics, and there's always something for everybody coming up within the next few weeks. We hope we'll see you there. And then to keep things short and sweet, just grab your phone and you can get to
Don't die on us, Isaac.
Yeah,
you have to work tomorrow.
Here. I can't talk. But what I wanted to end on is something that I ended on with some of my recent groups, is to say, you know, there's a lot of craziness happening in schools and homes and everything everywhere, but what's something funny that happened? And I'm going to share Dana's that she was going to share had she been able to jump on. But one of her colleagues, she was talking at lunch, they were trying to plan things and figure out exactly what they could do to make the tech work. And she said one of her kinders, they had called the parents and said, she keeps jumping off, you know, she's 5. So she's getting out of her seat. She's not like really paying any attention. And like, no problem, we'll talk to her. So they talk to her right after the next break, zooms in. There's a, you know, one of those huge like American Girl dolls in her seat with like the hands up on the table. The girl didn't show up the rest of the day. Yeah, this 5-year-old just passed kindergarten in my eyes because the problem-solving skills. Think, oh, okay, I need to be on the screen, no problem. So what's something funny that you guys have seen or heard or?
Oh my goodness, funny?
Yeah.
I had a principal dealing with some fallout of a student on a kindergartner actually was on her Zoom call in the morning, and I guess her dad was getting ready in the background, and he was running around in his underwear. Yeah. and all the kids saw him, and
I don't know if mine is funny or gross, but I still feel like a 3rd grade boy. But you know, we moved to Williamsburg and we're really grateful that we live right on the river, but there's this Zeroscape in front of our terrace of plants. Well, it's where lots of people like to go to the bathroom.
Yeah.
So literally right out, but it is pretty comical because like you can see out on the pier who has to go because they start to panic and look around, and then they end up in basically right by our patio.
Yeah. While you're on Zoom talking to me.
Yeah. While I'm on Zoom, and so like today I was like literally working, and I was like, oh my goodness, this is getting. Yeah. But anyway, I mean that's probably not a really good way to end, but whatever.
Well, I just want to say thank you to everybody who joined us and who always joins us, because the Core Collaborative, as Paul said at the start, is a learning network. It's all of us or none of us. And so we love having the opportunity to give with people. And we'll be back in a month with Katie, but we've got so many other things happening. And we've got some bonus masterclasses coming out. But thank you so much, Paul and Rachel. That was an
Thank
It was
amazing.
you.
fun. Thank you.
That was
Yeah,
fun.
Yeah, yeah. See you later, everyone.
Yeah.